I work with trying to find ways of creating experiential processes which offer a way of most viscerally grappling with these fundamental questions, in the belief that these fundamental questions underlie most of the questions we have, even in modern culture. You know, most of these questions are focused around the question of survival. You know, how do I survive? How do I provide for my family? And how do I find meaningful relationships with other people? How do I find a way of relating to the world that seems to me to have meaning and at the same time survive? These are the questions we're still dealing with, and you know, if you trace them back, if you track them back, what you find is that they end up being back there at those really primal questions. You know, what is this thing called life anyway? Why are we doing this? And how can we really grapple with this question? You know, is it an intellectual question, or do we need to find other ways of really going into an exploration of who we are, and of what this thing called life is about? And in a way, I think, you know, when you look at indigenous traditions, and I suppose it's probably true also of a lot of our Western tradition as well, you know, a lot of the spiritualities, cosmologies, and their related practices and so on are centered around ways that have been devised over the millennia for us as human beings to grapple with these questions. To grapple with them firstly at the deepest levels, and then gradually at the more practical, everyday level. How do we live? How do we relate to each other in a way that is integrative rather than disintegrative? You know, how do we create law? Where does that law come from? You know, and traditionally, in most indigenous cultures, law was something that exists out there. It's an integral part of the universe, and we as humans, in a sense, if we are to survive, need at some level to understand and adhere to that law. In the pre-industrial cultures of Southern Africa, that law was imparted through wilderness. So, in a way, in order to survive, there are certain ways we have to live. There are certain ways we have to interact with each other. There are certain ways we have to interact with our world. There are certain ways we have to understand ourselves in the context of the greater whole. And these understandings were the guiding principles by which everything that we did was built, if you like, or was kind of coalesced around. The problem we face in modern culture principally is that when you look at law, for a start, law has been effectively created by humans, for humans, with a principal understanding that humans are at the kind of the top of the pyramid of all creation and have dominion over all that we see. And to that extent, we own the rest of creation. And it then becomes about managing it. It then becomes about apportioning it among us. It then becomes also about how much of it we can accrue and draw to ourselves. And this is where a lot of the problems begin in terms of the destruction of our environment. And what we don't realize ultimately is that we're fundamentally destroying ourselves.